you're put in this situation because of all the pressure that's coming with the money that you put out, the time investment that you have takes over your mind. It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, and we tend to live in a society where we always want a tangible result. You want that championship.
Bingo.
You want that trophy. You want that medal. And I shared this with you earlier before we came on. I sense when I do some games, you hear what the parents say, and sometimes it's not even what they say, it's how they say it. They kind of live vicariously through their children. I always believed if you were a junior varsity coach, it's your first job. Get them ready for varsity. You can't get kids ready for varsity if you don't put them in. You always hear, oh, they're not experienced. Well, how do you get experience? I see this every time I ref a game. What is the coach there for? The coach is there to coach during the game. Coach not just the player, but the person as well. A coach can draw up a play in a huddle at a timeout, and daddy's saying, do this, do that. So right there, That's destroyed. And I'm going to quote someone who, Bill Fox, God rest his soul, great coach, better man. Bill Fox had a really good saying. He said, we could have the greatest game or the greatest 2-hour practice, and your mom and dad can ruin it in 5 minutes at the dinner table. It is so true.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of Fighting for Overtime. I'm your host, Coach Tony, and this is going to be great, man. Like, we just went from having my daughter, which is a very emotional episode, to having my 7th grade teacher. Like, hold on, this is fun. I'm going to make you laugh, Mr. Odes. I'm going to make you laugh because I got to put this in perspective. Number one, as a coach, you always have people that you look up to, people that have made a point in your life. You were my first male teacher at a time where there wasn't male teachers. And I remember vividly that, number one, you were a male teacher, but the first teacher I ever heard curse. But it was hilarious. So I'll never forget it. At the school, you were standing in front of the room. Somebody had thrown an egg or a rock or something at the window because they didn't like that we had a male teacher. And you were just like, son of a bitch. You people didn't hear that. You were red. It was the icebreaker, though. From that point on, I'm like, yo, I like this dude. Wait, he was at gold medal and everything. It was just the coolest teacher at that time in your 7th grade. And it was a lot of, and no disrespect, but a lot of older women that you had that were kind of like on the last legs. And here comes this young, flashy guy, had a nice big ring on. And I was like, wow, man, all right. I can get down with this. And ever since then, man, like, you could tell your knowledge for Notre Dame, you were a sports guy, and man, the rest is history. Here you are right here for the Fighting for Overtime episode, man. Thanks for so much for coming here live.
Glad to be here, Tony. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And just for you all that don't know, he's going to get into it, but this is 30 plus years experience coaching or umpiring and refereeing and coaching, basically,
30,
right?
Yeah, over 30.
Over 30 years. And, we talk about the landscape has just changed. And again, this is not just all negative, but we do have to bring things up and kind of just like how things have changed and put it in perspective. But let me just talk about your overall experiences from 30 years ago to now. If you could just kind of put a stamp on the one thing you think has changed the most, whether it be from a personality, from a sport, just from anything in that whole Catholic League, right? Northeast League, big wide range of personalities. What do you think has changed the most?
Yeah, as far as something that's not real positive, I think there's much more of a win at all cost culture. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's funny. We say, I have a basketball game tonight. I have a baseball game over the weekend. People forget that it is a game. And if you listen to somebody say, hey, I got a game usually indicates that you're supposed to have fun. And I see, unfortunately, and it's not all the time, but I see it a lot where I don't see the fun being had by the kids like I used to.
Yep.
And again, I want to emphasize that that's not everyone.
Right. 100%.
But it is something I see a little more of, and it's sad a little bit.
It is sad. It is sad. And we talked about this. You talked about specifically the amount of kids that used to be playing the intramural sports and the rec league sports. And now everybody is a travel player. Everybody gets pushed into travel. So I'm thinking, see if you agree. I feel like that is one of the reasons why the fun element has gone, because now it went from having fun with your friends and going to a game, one practice a week, a game on the weekends, and then you get to hang out to hitting coach, pitching coach, 4-night training, $3,000 travel weekends, right? So sometimes I think that's why these kids aren't having fun.
I don't think I could have said it better. That's so true. The local club organizations having 20 or 30 teams are long gone. Just to give a couple examples, your Liberty Bells, your Crispins, your Parkwoods, your Somertons, they still have teams, great kids, great coaches, but they used to have a ton more teams than they do now. What you're seeing is, and it's with most sports too, these club travel teams, soccer now.
Soccer's huge.
Softball and baseball.
Yep.
Lacrosse, AAU basketball is another one.
We could get into stories about that.
Yes, we could. Not one of my favorites, but anyway. And I think you're saying you hit the nail on the head when you said you don't see the kids having fun. It's supposed to be fun with your friends. It's not like that anymore. Really, I'm 59 years old. When I was a kid, we played at Roosevelt. There were a ton of teams. You don't see that anymore, though. And it's kind of sad.
It is sad because I remember I would go from sport to sport to sport. Like I would play my baseball for 3 months, and then I would go to basketball, and then I would go to soccer. I played for Wiss AC or Wissonoming, right? I was like, got a hat, socks, got a shirt, right? I was good to go. Now, forget that just, it doesn't exist. And I think that's why this goes a little further into it, but people talk about the injuries to a lot of the younger athletes. I say that's because they're playing triple the amount of time. I mean, they're burning themselves out.
I want to get into that part too. But yes, physically, it's taking a toll on their bodies. But Tony, what I see is that actual burnout. You got a kid that's playing club soccer and CYO soccer. And then for his local team soccer, he's playing 12 months. And by the time he's 14 or 15, he's like, I don't enjoy it anymore. It's not just the physical toll. Man, it takes a mental toll big time. They don't enjoy it because I think maybe not intentionally, there's a lot of pressure put on. Paying $3,000 for you to play club soccer, you better be good. And not everybody's going to be Pele.
No,
you know?
Well, people think they're going to be Pele.
Yeah, yes, they do. Yes, they do.
And it's funny because I did a whole episode last year, and you want to go back, Fighting for Overtime, following all podcast networks. And I had the percentages of the kids that played Division I, and it was mind-boggling how low of a percentage is. And I used to say, we all know, you can see the kid. Most likely, it's always the kid who you see wants to do it, not being forced to do it. It's a kid who wants to be in a gym every day. He's voluntarily doing it. He wants it or she wants it. I see that. But the problem is that's far and few between. A lot of it is the parents pushing the kid to that point and pushing to that level and berating them and beating them up mentally about it. And it's not good, man.
No, it's not. Again, I go back to the pressure that's put on the kid. And think about this for a second. And I see this every time I ref a game. What is the coach there for? The coach is there to coach during the game. Coach not just the player, but the person as well. A coach can draw up a play in a huddle at a timeout, and then little Mary runs out and daddy's saying, do this, do that. So right there, that's destroyed. And I'm going to quote someone who my brother played for, Father Judge, Bill Fox, God rest his soul, great coach, better man. Bill Fox had a really good saying. He said, we could have the greatest game or the greatest 2-hour practice, and your mom and dad can ruin it in 5 minutes at the dinner table. It is so true.
I'll tell you what, that brings up one of the topics you talked about was the ride home. And I will say this, it's crazy because I have two thoughts about this. I'll see what you think about it. Number one, I do think, and I should say I do know from coaching that there are parents that are very vindictive and very toxic. Simple as that. But there's also that indirect feeling of when you're on the sideline, and I've been there. Everybody knows me. I'm fully transparent. I'm sitting there going, wow, why is Johnny playing over my kid? What do they think he's so much better? It's an indirect human thought because I'm saying to myself, I'm paying all this money. Why am I being like that? It's because it's hard to explain, but you're put in a situation because of all the pressure that's coming with the money that you put out, the time investment that you have takes over your mind. It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, and we tend to live in a society where we always want a tangible result. We want that championship.
Bingo.
We want that trophy. We want that medal. And I shared this with you earlier before we came on. I sense when I do some games, you hear what the parents say, and sometimes it's not even what they say, it's how they say it. They kind of live vicariously through their children.
Yep.
I think that can be very unhealthy, unnecessary and unrealistic pressures on your kid. And again, I go back to they should be having fun.
Yes, it is. It's a nightmare. It is. And it just continues to get worse. And I don't see it getting better.
It is problematic. But one thing I want to make very clear, there are people who cheer their kids the right way. They don't get enough credit. They're doing it the right way. They're letting their son or daughter be coached.
Yep.
They're not screaming from the sidelines. They're cheering. but they're not screaming for their son or daughter to do a certain play differently when the coach drew something else up. And they don't get enough credit. But unfortunately, I think we have a little more of the negative. I go back to what's the coach there for?
You're right. And I'm trying to think, I don't know if it was a college coach was watching a reel about it. And he was like, look, what I do, yeah, I can coach. But when I go watch my kids, I shut up. That's on you. When the kid comes home and complains, don't tell me. And I think that's the problem. And again, I'm guilty. I did it in the beginning, but I learned. I made mistakes and I learned. Because when I start coaching, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not liking this guy, but I was that guy. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to learn from what you do, but not everybody has an opportunity to learn. They got one shot, one child, one kid. And that's why, again, I wanted to do these shows to bring awareness. And maybe you look at yourself in the mirror a little bit. Maybe you're like, you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe that is me. What am I really doing? Right? Because I do think that can help sometimes.
Absolutely. It's funny you bring this topic up. God rest his soul. My father passed over 20 years ago, but he was my greatest teacher, hands down. And he was my greatest coach, and he probably never realized it. Let me explain what I mean by that real quick. My father, when my older brother and I played at Roosevelt, he coached, but he would never coach us. I think right there speaks volumes for how he had a pretty decent perspective. He would never, ever yell at a coach, at an umpire. And he more or less told us, I'll keep it clean. But he says, you know, basically, you disrespect a coach or an umpire, you know what'll happen when you get home. And I'll just leave it at that. And the other thing, he kept us humble. I'll never forget this. As long as I live, I was in 5th grade. And we played up at Ethan Allen School.
Oh, wow.
Indoor gym. It was like a matchbox. It had a low roof. And I was on the Robins. Our team named orange shirts. We were called the Robins. And we won 24-23, and I scored 24 points. I scored all the points. I was a little taller, and I actually stopped shooting. My coach took me out. I didn't want people calling me a gunner or a hog or whatever we used to say back then. I get home, and I'm thinking my father's going to pat me on the ass figuratively and say, oh, you were great, son. First thing he said to me, got to learn to go with your left hand. And he said, you can be better with your foul shots. And man, I was young, but I knew where he was coming from. Yeah. That was Pop. God rest his soul.
I love it, man. Because I hate to say, but we live in the it's all okay society, right? And granted, I do think there's a line. But I think unfortunately some people are way over the line and way under the line. You know, you can these kids do need to be challenged. They do, but there's a way to do it. Have you ever coached girls?
Oh, yeah.
I've always said coaching girls is a different dynamic.
It is.
Yeah, right? Emotion. You'll know right away if you're going too far. And they can't handle it. And that's when you need to. But I've been to some, man, and they just don't know when to draw the line. Now you're silenced. As a coach, now you're not getting anywhere. Now you're done. She's just shut down now. And no matter what, you could be telling her the best thing in the world. Doesn't matter. So I think that, unfortunately, one of these issues we deal with today is there's that line. Nobody's in between. Either somebody is far too low to just say, it's okay. No matter what you do, it's okay, to where they're in your face wanting to rip your nuts out. Right? I mean, let's be honest. Yep. But there's no in between, right?
No. And one of the things you asked me if I coached girls. I had 3 years, and they were great years when I was at Archbishop Bryan. And I was the vice principal at the time. I coached JV girls softball. Andy Hafel, God rest his soul, dear friend of mine. He was the varsity coach. Wonderful man, great coach, better person, like I said about Coach Fox. He didn't have to tell me who to play, how much to play them. I always believed if you were a junior varsity coach, what's your first job? Get them ready for varsity. You can't get kids ready for varsity if you don't put them in, okay? Some kids are better than others.
Thank you.
But how do you always hear, oh, they're not experienced. Well, how do you get experience? What's a major leaguer? A major leaguer is a rookie that somebody gave an opportunity to.
Point.
And that's so true. And I enjoyed it. The only reason I gave it up is because I went back to school. I went to St. Joe's and got my master's degree, and I just didn't have enough hours in the day. I didn't want to leave. Thank you so much.
Absolutely,
I appreciate that.
Man.
I'll say this. I'll give a plug to St. Joe's. The Hawk will never die.
Oh, there you go, man. That's awesome, man. But, you bring up a great point, because that JV varsity thing is, man, that brings up a lot of good and bad points. I know, especially in this area, it's been miserable on many different levels. But you make great points. What I've always said, how do these kids get the experience if you don't even let them get in? That what happens if they are a 3-year junior varsity player and their 4th year to go to varsity? They've never had an opportunity. They're already done. Unless they have a position because there's nobody there, they're probably not going to play. I just think that we've lost focus on the high school experience. And that's supposed to be a fun 4 years.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Those are the best 4 years of your life.
That's what we've always been told, right? Mm-hmm. High school, best 4 years of your life. I graduated from North Catholic. I never thought that I would like going to school with all boys. And I tell you what, it was the best experience in the world.
Same here.
Right? I mean, I was like, I got up. I didn't care what my hair looked like, right? I didn't care, right?
Some of us don't have to worry about that anymore.
I just give it one of these. Always smooth, though, man. Always smooth.
Yes, it was.
But the only thing I was worried about was my hair looked good for 2:45 at the bus stop with the little flower girls hopping on the Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, that's all I'm worried about, right? What if you don't go to college? What if you don't play after you're 17 or 18? It's all for nothing. And I'll tell you what, it's a shame. And I don't really think that element is fixable, to be honest with you, because it just continues to happen. As far as I know, at least up here.
Here's the thing with that. I will say this. I very, very respectfully kind of disagree on one thing you just said. No, and to be honest, I'll use basketball as an example.
Okay.
If you ask a good basketball coach, what's their favorite part of coaching a team? The real good ones will say their favorite part is practice. The games are secondary, okay, because it's within those 2 hours you can have the most impact. And we talked earlier before we came on. I was always a believer that you can learn so much from playing on a team. Besides the basketball, you learn to work with people. You learn to take instruction. You learn to take criticism. And sometimes that criticism can be pretty damn hard.
Yep.
But you learn. So when I hear somebody say it was all for nothing, that part I kind of don't agree with, because if you put it in perspective, that's up to the player who went through it. You can take a step back and say, hey, I did get something out of it. Maybe I should have played a little more. Who knows? And there might be disappointment on that end. But I always believe that if you have the right perspective, time is never wasted. You can always learn something. And maybe sometimes, this might be unfortunate, sometimes you learn a lesson. Okay, I'm not going to be like that if I want to coach. And that's just as valuable.
That's true.
If that makes sense.
Listen, and again, that's why I love having conversations.
Yeah.
Because I'm the first person to say I'm not always right. And I feel like conversations are always learning experiences. You have a lot more experience than I do, which I love it because I don't get that other element. And you're right. I do not disagree. I think sometimes we may get jaded from personal experience.
Sure.
Right? And
definitely.
It's very hard to see it all. Maybe if I didn't have 3 kids who really got screwed in certain situations, I'd be able to see it differently. And I wouldn't have all these people that are agreeing. Yeah. But there's also people that don't feel that way. Right. And I've always said that not everybody's right. Everybody has their own experience. My thing is, I just think that sometimes mentioned about what they make of it. So I look at that and go, the only thing I would say is, yes, sometimes though, they're hindered by how much they can make of it. And I want to ask you this question. I'm curious to see your opinion on this. So last episode, because I had mixed reactions with this statement, and I feel very strongly about this. I feel that if you are a coach, say you're a coach in Mayfair, and and there's only one team right now, is still Mayfair Shamrocks or Holy Terrors?
There is no Mayfair.
Really?
That's not to say there aren't teams that aren't from Mayfair. Like Holy Terrors, for example, is a Mayfair team. But when I was playing, when I was a kid,
you had all of them. We were just talking about,
Mayfair Shamrocks, Mayfair Red Devils, Mayfair Monarchs, Mayfair AC. And that was baseball, soccer, basketball. You could conceivably play 4 different Mayfair teams in 4 weekends.
And now they're not. Now they're not there.
No, not at all. Not even close.
Let's say it's Holy Terrors, okay? And there was one team for Holy Terrors is all they had. You were the coach. So at baseball, so you coach these kids for the last 4, highly involved. Now you go and become the varsity coach for, would you say it's Father Judge? Where a lot of Holy Terrors, they go with Father Judge? I know it's like a mix, but
yeah, it's open enrollment now, but I would say the majority of kids would probably go to Father Judge.
So you get the job at Father Judge, your head baseball coach.
Okay.
I disagree with it. And this is my logic. So my point is, you have a group of players that come out for tryouts. So you have player A, we'll just call A is John. So John comes out, John's played for you. You've watched John play. He has a shitty tryout. Terrible. Indirectly, the psyche, and tell me if I'm wrong, will say, you know what, man, John's just having a bad day. I've watched John. No, that's not him. Just a bad day for John. Now you have Michael, player B, who you don't know, who's from up here. Terrible tryout. Does he get that same benefit? No.
Probably not.
Right? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, and I'm not saying every coach will be like that, but I just think the human mind, the way it works, there's no way you're not going to say, I know John was all right. I don't know if Michael's tested. I've never watched Michael play. So push comes to shove, who's getting the job? Johnny.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, Michael could be but he doesn't have that opportunity. Right. And that's why I don't think I'm a huge advocate for coaches. If you coach in a community, you shouldn't be afforded the opportunity to be a coach in that central location, only because I don't think it's fair. I don't know what you think about that. And again, disagree, agree. Just I'm curious what your points are.
I don't know if I agree or disagree. And what I mean
it's tough.
What I mean by that is every coach is different.
Yes.
You would think, you mentioned the player from up here who might not be from the Father Judge area. You would think if tryouts are held, and tryouts are fair. In other words, kids go through the same drills, same batting sequences. They hit live pitching, or they hit off the machine, hit off the tee. They do the same outfield and infield drill. You'd think you'd see something in the kid from up here that says, hey, wait a minute. I think a natural reaction is something you hit the nail on the head. A natural reaction is go with what you're familiar with.
Right.
And that's a human reaction.
Right,
We're not saying it's right or wrong.
Right, 100%.
But it's go with what you're familiar with, go with who you're familiar with.
But you make a good point, though.
Yeah.
If you are a very good coach, a fundamentally sound coach, you can look at footwork. You can look, look at mobility. You can be like, all right, he may not have hit a ball, but his stance is correct. You could tell this kid's trained. Unfortunately, I feel like it doesn't always happen that way. Again, right or wrong, that's just the way I feel about it.
No, there's some credence to that, because you see and you hear a lot where, the team's already picked. Some kids may really not get a fair shot. I happen to, if I can use a personal example, where I work at now, Bishop Eustace, they have a nationally renowned baseball coach, Sam Tropiano. He just, I think it was last year before, won National Coach of the Year. He really, really has a knack with baseball, obviously. A super, super person. He also teaches at the school. He is someone I would want my son to play for, because in the short time I've known him, I get the sense that he cares about the person as well as the player. And I think we lose that sometimes till we get that. We want the end result. We want the win. We want the trophy. We want the medal. And we forget about, the person's character and building them as a man or a woman.
Me, that's the coach's biggest role, is building that person, whether it be male or female, to get to that next level of adulthood. I mean, these are preteens. For my coaches from 8 years old. And I feel like they all taught me something. My old coach, Mr. Cliver, who I still taught to this day, I'll never forget it. He coached me in basketball. And one of the biggest lessons he taught me was the value of money. Bought these junker cars, like literally. I mean, he paid $50 for a car. And he would say, you know what? I want the biggest car I can find. He's like, because I want to be able to take my basketball teams to practice. We would meet with sports club. We'd all barrel in these cars. They were bare, like hanging on with Band-Aids.
Good old days.
Right? And he would drive it for like 2 years and be like, I got my money's worth. Let me get another one. And I was like, wow, he's really stretching it. But I remember that to this day. And I say that because that's what you're really learning as a player from a coach. Yes, some coaches have undeniable fundamental instincts and can teach you so much, but I think it's the life lessons that you really learn the most.
I not agree more. And if I can piggyback on what you just said, which I 1,000% agree with. One of the things I say to my students at Bishop Eustace, I'm blessed because I work with every kid in the school and I work with every teacher. I set up service programs. And one of the things I try to knock home with them is this. It's like, okay, for example, the seniors, their visit, they do about 6 visits a quarter. Okay. Their visit's supposed to be an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I try to tell them it's not the hour and a half or 2 hours that matters. It's what you do in that hour and a half or 2 hours. Parlay that to sports. What are you doing in those 2 hours in practice? If I can give you a quick example of one of my kids' service. One girl goes to a nursing home and she paints the nails of an elderly lady and does her hair and she plays card games with her. Now, if you don't know the dynamic of a service program, you're like, what the hell is she getting credit for painting a woman's nails? Lady might not see another human being other than her medical staff, the doctors and the nurses. Yep. They think that's the greatest thing in the world. That's service with a capital S. It's what you do in that 2 hours. So getting back to you mentioning, you get something out of it. If you work your ass off for 2 hours and you never play a minute, I don't care what anybody says, you get something out of that because you're going to learn. You're going to learn to work with people. Like I said earlier, you're going to learn to take criticism. You're going to learn to take a compliment. You're going to learn how to adjust on the fly. Those are life skills. Those are stuff beyond basketball and baseball. And you can never, ever, that never, ever goes to waste.
No, you're right, man. The nursing home thing is powerful, man. Yeah. Like it is. And I don't think people realize that. No. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, my grandmother was in a nursing home when I was in second grade teacher, Mrs. Bello. It's crazy. I
remember my second.
Ain't that crazy? Yeah. Mrs. Bello getting a shot. I don't even know if she's alive. But I remember my grandma, my mom's mom was in a nursing home on Roosevelt Boulevard. Right next to the car wash, Roosevelt and Ron in a Boulevard. There was a nursing home there. And I remember, like, even as a second grader, seeing So we would always go to see my nanny, but there were people never got visits. People that just like there was nobody ever there for them. And my mom is one of the nicest people in the world. Does stuff for everybody, and she would always make sure did anybody come see you today? So like if we got flowers from that, she got 3 flowers and that meant it could have been a $5 flower for it doesn't matter. It was the thought that you actually gave them 5 minutes, and that's huge.
Tony, it's funny you mentioned that because just today, and I think I shared this earlier with you where I came on, I visited the junior religion classes at Bishop Houston. As they start their senior services a little different. Like I mentioned, it goes by not just hours, but by visits.
Okay.
And I said basically the same exact thing to them. I said, that might not seem like anything significant to you, but it means the world to them. And again, I go back to it's what they did in that hour and a half or 2 hours. You gave that person. And I said that exact same thing. A lot of them are so old, they don't have family. So they're not getting visitors. You might be the only person they see. And they look forward to that.
And they light up, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
They light up. I always remember that. I always remember that episode. I was a Full House watcher back in the day, and I remember with DJ. I forget the guy's name, but it was Grady from Sanford and Son, right? And she bailed him out of the nursing home, and like he thought it was the best thing in the world. He wasn't supposed to be gone, but he was like, I ain't been outside in 10 years, right? But it was just like that's how happy they are to be able to somebody to give them the time of day, man. Like it's crazy. It's powerful. That's the word. I think we're gonna call this episode powerful because it is. And then I get talking to my man, Mr. Odes, my 7th grade teacher, man. This is awesome. It comes full circle. But let's get into some referees, some umpire story because I sent you an article. And just so everybody knows, I want to read it because I think this was pretty powerful. This was on KUTV, just posted this week, talking about a referee shortage. This was specifically in Utah, but I think the title of it is huge because it says referee shortage in Utah highlights growing hostility in youth sports. And it starts off, it says, it's a problem that's becoming all too familiar on sports fields across the country. Referees are facing increasing hostility from parents and coaches, leading many to quit. And it says this is a troubling trend that's playing out in Utah, but all over the country, raising concerns about the future of youth sports. Hostility. So if I had to ask you just right off the bat, the hostility that an umpire or a referee faces, even at a youth sports level, is it to a point where we can't even imagine?
It's getting there, and it's getting there. Unfortunately, it's getting there pretty quickly. I think one of the biggest things that parents, coaches, players, spectators forget is before I put the striped shirt on in the basketball game, I'm a human being, and we're flawed as humans. We learn that. We learn that from our teachers. We will make mistakes. We'll make them every day. The hope is that you get better and you learn from them. Sometimes they don't give us that chance. They think we missed a call or something like that, and they go berserk. They go bananas, and they're embarrassing their kids sometimes.
Oh man,
and yeah, it can get pretty intense, pretty crazy.
It's hard for me to not admit. I mean, I one of those coaches, and it was something I had to work on. Like I literally thrown out of a lot of games as a soccer coach to the point where I was definitely labeled, and it got to a point where my radio nickname was Jigsaw. So shout out Sean Brace for giving that to me, but it's because I'm a very in your face personality, and I'm very passionate. And when I say my kids, it's all my kids, and all that hard work that you talked about, like you would learn in practice. I hate it for the fact that these kids, a call would go wrong. And I know nobody's perfect, but it would affect them so much and it would make me nuts. But then I grew to this. I also had to look and be like, damn, what am I showing them? Like at the same time where I'm going nuts on the sideline and they're getting a kick out of it, it's really not teaching them the right way either. Right? So it's teaching them that they can go out there and they can disrespect the umpire or the referee. And a lot of times I'd be like, yo, that's my job. Shut up. Let me do that. Yeah. Not to say that's right. Yeah. Right. But I will. I'm going to give myself a pound of back because I remember my last 2 years of coaching. It took me this long. My last 2 years of coaching, I didn't get one card. And they literally, like, I got a call from the ICSL director was like, were you at all the games this year? I'm like, yeah, what? They're like, we never heard your name one time. I'm like, I learned. Took me a long time, 2 years in a row. So, but I think that was the biggest thing is, like I said, looking at how I'm being perceived now and what I'm teaching these kids I'm coaching, because I'm not teaching them the right thing.
It's modeling behavior.
Yeah.
And we talk about that in education. We talk about that in everyday life, not just sports. Little Johnny or little Mary see mommy and daddy, the coach, and they look up to them and they think that's the right thing to do, and it's not. And unfortunately, again, you're seeing that more and more. I also go back to something I said about the good coaches will tell you their favorite part of coaching is practice. If you coach right in practice, you don't have to be very animated during the game. If you really think about it.
Yes.
If you really think about it. Not all, but I think some coaches actually believe that they got to raise their hands, they got to walk the sideline, and they got to scream because they think that's part of coaching. I'm not saying there's never a point where you raise your voice, or give instructions or anything like that. That's unrealistic. But they think they got to do it all the time, and that's just not it. It's not the case.
Where were you like 15 years ago? Because I needed this, right? Because but it's so I talk about this because it's like self-evaluation, right? Because that was me. But again, with the 2 years not getting thrown out, I learned how to not be as boisterous, and just let them make mistakes. Teachable moments when they came to the sideline, and people be like, dude, are you okay? I'm like, what? They're like, we don't even hear you. I'm like, you know what? I got to learn. I don't need to be like that right now. Like, I need these kids to learn. And when they come in, I'll tell them what they do wrong, but I don't need to be that way anymore. So I listen, I think you're spot on with that, because my one buddy would always tell me, he would show up at a game as a coach and he had a lawn chair and he would just sit there. He would sit down, he'd put his sunglasses on, and people would be like, what are you doing? He's like, letting them play. He's like, I would never say a word. Wouldn't say a word. I'd watch them play, make the substitutions, but you would never hear me. He's like, because I told them if they can't transfer 2 weeks worth of practice into this game, maybe they should be out there anyway. And I'm like, wow, it's pretty point. Right? I would have never. I should have learned from that, but I didn't. That's what happens when you're hard-headed Italian, right? I think this stat was pretty powerful. It says the young umpires that come in right now, it says we lose about 70% of what we train every year. And I look at that. No, 70%. That's that's money, that's resources, that's time allocation. And you think it's just because they're getting berated so much, they're like, wait, man, I don't need this.
That's a big part of it. What you're seeing now, and I speak to I'll talk about basketball and baseball real quick. With basketball,
yeah, sure.
Dear friend of mine, Don Comiskey, is one of my signers for Suburban 1.
Okay.
Conference your kids go to school in. Not
yet. Yeah.
And we talk about sometimes how we're top heavy in age. In other words, I'm 59. I got people pretty significantly older than me, late 60s, that are still doing a great job.
Still doing it.
We have some below me, but then we have that giant gap. There's no young people coming in. And I think, for the lack of a better word, with all due respect, I think the bullshit they see, I'm not getting yelled at, I'm not getting screamed at. And I can understand that. We're human. Okay. I think it's smart for a referee to almost expect some things during the game, because it's just reality. Right. And I think that can help you a little bit. But some of the stuff, when it becomes abusive, when it becomes personal, there's no place for that.
And I think that's where we're going with this. Like, even with this article, there's a quote says, a dad and his son were physically assaulted after a slow pitch game in a parking lot. When asked how many times police have been called, he responded, 3 too many. Here's the thing, and I don't know if you've ever seen this or witnessed it, but all my years, even as crazy as I was, and even if I got thrown out, and even if I was berating somebody, and at the end, I always apologized. I always at least was like, look, man, it got the better of me. Yeah, I still think you were wrong, but I still acted ridiculous. But now we're going to, like, I remember as a teen that just from a coach that I had parents from another team following, not the parents, my kids, and berating my kids in the parking lot, grown adults. And I'm like, guys, what are we doing? I mean, is this commonplace now? Unfortunately,
it's getting there. It is. I see it, and it's unfortunate. It's sad.
Wow.
I get back to, it should be fun. We call it a game. We call it a game for a reason. It should be something that the kids enjoy, and not only enjoy, but learn something from. And that when they experience something like that, or they pay witness to something like that, that takes away from the learning experience. I really believe that. I'll share an experience I had. Now, these are 3rd and 4th grade kids. I mentioned earlier before we came on that
3rd and 4th grade people, 3rd and 4th grade.
Boys and girls mixed, because most of them, it's them playing basketball for the first time. And I was at a local school, and I mentioned to you that we only have one ref because these are little kids. And I do it a little differently. If a kid walks or travels and they're out front, they're not going to the basket, I stop and I explain. I try to teach them. It's the teacher in me. It's just what I do. And I really enjoy doing that. Well, there was a ball went out of bounds, and I'm handing the ball to a little girl. So I'm by myself. So I'm handing her ball. And all of a sudden, this mother comes up to me behind my back, gets right in my face. You got to be kidding me. You got to see that. And my first question was, see what, ma'am? I said, I'm ready to hand the ball in to administer the ball for an inbound play. I said, what do you want me to see? My daughter just fell, and I think she was pushed. I said, ma'am, I said, I'm sorry. I said, I am by myself. There's no way I can see when I'm administering the ball I have to, because the girl's this big. I don't want to, drop the ball on her or anything like that. And she just kept going. I said, ma'am, that's enough. And she just wouldn't. So I had to toss her. This is 3rd and 4th grade. You think I want to go like this at a 3rd and 4th grade game?
Yeah, you're there thinking this is going to be cool, man. Like I get to watch these little kids play, and I'm going to help them out, and you got to deal with that.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest with you, I had 3 or 4 parents from this school. They come up, they shook their head. They're like, I don't know how you didn't toss her the first time she opened her mouth. I said, look,
you're trying.
Yeah, you're trying. You give them a little leash, but then the leash becomes shorter every time you keep going. And eventually I had to do what I had to do. And I don't like to do that. There's no fun in that. God. And like I said, what are the kids witnessing?
And what do they grow up understanding?
Yeah.
And man, Mr. Odes, I still call you Mr. Odes. I'll always call you Mr. Odes.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's funny. Like growing up the way we grow up, there's just certain people that you just respect so much. You're always going to call them Mr. or Mrs.
Yeah.
And I would do it as a coach. Like I had a couple parents that were, I was coaching their daughter, and they were probably twice my age, but it was just in my power to call Mr. Like, what are you doing? Well, I'm like, I don't know. It's just me. Like it's the way I was brought up, and it's what I learned.
Tony, I'm 59 years old. I still say Mr.
Say,
I mentioned a friend of mine, Don Comiskey. Don, unfortunately, like myself, he lost both parents, just lost his mother the other day.
Oh man.
Always called her Mrs. Comiskey, Mr. Comiskey. By the way, Mr. Comiskey was not only my favorite baseball coach, but I learned a valuable lesson from him. I had one season where I would make contact, but I would hit everything in the air, and I wasn't hitting the ball hard. That man never gave up on me. That man said, Mike, he says, you're going to be batting third. You're going to be playing. He says, you got to just stick with it. And eventually I came out of it. It's like anything else. I see guys making $40 million a year. They go into slumps too. It happens.
It happens.
And sometimes it gets mental, and you over try, and you try too hard. You press. Great man. But I don't think I ever called him Don once. His name was Don also, and Mrs. Comiskey, Lorraine. I never called them by their first name. That's just the way we were brought up. You're so right. And I think we've lost that too.
No, we definitely have lost that. I mean, just when I talked about my old Mr. Clive, I'm calling him. I would never be like, hey, what's up, Bill? No, I call him Mr. C, Mr. Cliver. I mean, that was my coach. Like, we have lost so much. And I know that as a society that we're supposed to change a little bit, but there's still morals that you should continue to keep.
That's so powerful. I could not agree more. The core of your character should never, ever change. Circumstances may change, but are you a loyal person to your family? Are you honest? Are you respectful? And are you modeling that for the people around you to see? One of the things I was blessed. I gave a talk to the sophomores during sophomore retreat, and it was about charity, and our patron saint, St. Vincent Pallotti, was big on charity and service. And I told them, I said, sometimes the littlest things you do, saying hello, holding the door for someone, I said, you have no idea what's on that person's mind and how much that small act of kindness can mean. And you saw their eyes light up a little bit. I think I got that one home. It makes you feel pretty good.
Yeah, man.
But it's so true. And I go back to your question. We have to model that. That should never change in us. I'm not saying we're not going to make mistakes.
No,
because we're human first before anything.
Yes.
But that should your core values. I think stay the same.
They have to.
And
it's up to us. And I will say that. I know I always took it personal as a coach. it was up to me to instill that in my team. And I'll give you a quick example. So when we would practice at soccer, multiple fields. Now, I have at that time, 15, 16-year-old kids. Look, I'm not a big advocate for foul language all the time. I get it. They're going to slip, things of that nature. They're kids. I understand that. Well, we're practicing next to fields that have 9 and 10-year-old girls playing. So I overhear a couple of my players, F this, F that. I'm like, yo, I'm like, dude, do me a favor. Look around you. Understand where you're at. I'm like, yo, Luke, you got a little sister, right? He's like, yeah, okay, look over there. Do you think they need to hear that? Let's be understanding where we're at. And they're looking at me like, oh, coach, I'm sorry. I'm like, don't apologize. Just don't do it. But certain things, because they're not even thinking about that. And it's I say it, it's our job. I take it as an honor. It's my job. It was my job, but it was my job to make sure they understood that. And I could see like the other coaches and other people like, wow, yeah, that does still exist. And I think that if more of us continue to hammer that home, I think we got a shot.
I totally
hope anyway.
Absolutely. No, I hear you on that. And if I can say something, what players and students, if they're playing for their school, what they don't realize is they're representing whoever's on their jersey.
That's true.
Bishop Eustace, Parkwood.
That's true.
William Tennant. And I want to say this because I think this is very much connected to basically our whole discussion. I know when my brother played at St. Tim's and Father Judge, and I played at St. Tim's and Father Judge, you would run through a wall to play for your school. It is the total opposite. And I go back to AAU.
Yeah.
They're telling kids in 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th grade, CYO sucks. It's not important.
Yep.
This is where you're going to get better. And they lose that camaraderie with their classmates, their teammates that say, Our Lady Calvary, St. Tim's, and it's sad. It used to mean the world to play for your school. Kids would be devastated if they got cut from their school team.
Yep.
It's just not like that anymore. And that saddens me because
sucks.
I know how much it meant to me to have St. Timothy's and Father Judge across my chest.
Listen, we have gone through that in this community multiple times. We've gone through the coaches saying, you're not allowed to play for your club team. You're not allowed to play. And if you do, guess what? You're not playing. I mean, I've witnessed kids at Tennant were benched their senior year because they decided that they wanted to play with their friends. They weren't allowed. And you know what the sad part is? That it was accepted by the school. And I never understood that. Like, and it really started to make me think. I mean, it didn't happen to me personally, but these are just stories that told me. I started thinking, like, what kind of society are we living in? Like, what? Because I would always hear the word, and this would crawl up my spine: program. For the program. What about for the individual? How about for the kid? We're always thinking about the program, but that's again trophies and medals. And what about the kid? What about the experience? And so now you're telling him that he can't play with his friends because you need him for the program. And if he does, you're going to bench him? That's just wrong, man. That's just wrong.
I think to again piggyback on what you just said, I think another issue is, like, I remember when I played ball, sports were seasonal.
Yes.
You'd have soccer or football in the fall, basketball in the winter, then you go into baseball. You have summer leagues in basketball and all that, but you basically were seasonal. What I see as an absolutely huge problem now is all these sports are now becoming 12-month. So you want to play high school baseball and you're on the football team, your coach wants you at 7-on-7. Your coach wants you in the weight room. So there's conflicts there, even at the school level.
That's true.
Your AAU coaches tell you your ass is on the bench if you don't show up at the game. Yet you have a baseball game for your high school. You're putting the kids in a god-awful spot.
You are.
And it's hard. It's hard. I kind of like the way we had it when I was a kid a long time ago.
Yeah.
We were seasonal, and
yes.
we didn't have that issue. And I remember specifically at Father Judge, I played basketball my first year. They told the kids on the football team, do not even think about going on the basketball court until you're done. And they didn't get done until after Thanksgiving. They played Abraham Lincoln High School.
Yeah.
The Judge Lincoln game.
The turkey game, man.
So absolutely, turkey ball on Thanksgiving. Yep. So now it's just the opposite. And I think it's putting the kids in a bad spot. And indirectly the parents too, because the parents have to make decisions. Am I going to pay $3,000 to let Johnny or Mary play AAU? Or do I want them to play for the school? That's tough.
It's a lot of pressure out there.
It is.
And I don't know if you're a big fan of I'm a big fan of the Pivot podcast, and I love it with Ryan Clark. He always has some really good guests on, and it's just funny. But he had Del Carey on. I don't know if you heard this. Del, got to give him his props, man. Like, he was specifically talking about AAU, and he said, I pulled both of my kids out of AAU, and they asked him why. He said, because I wanted them to enjoy other sports. He's like, sure, they trained, but they weren't. I still said that they can still enjoy other sports while I can still allow them to train on what their craft is going to be. He's like, and I don't regret it, and I'm so glad that I did it. And that's funny, those kids kind of turned out okay, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
So, like, my whole thing is about that too, is the muscle memory. Like, different sports, you use different muscles, right?
That's so.
That was so huge about that.
And I hope you didn't think that we were going to go through a podcast without mentioning the Fighting Irish.
Oh, come on, man!
You know they were coming up with something.
Notre Dame fan right
me,
here,
baby. That's me.
Well, that's why I said. Remember, that's why we relate to you so much, because it was like, here's a male teacher in a female-dominated society. Okay, we finally got one of us, right? And he's a Notre Dame. All we talked about was the Fighting Irish, man. We knew it was a national holiday.
And I was always in a bad mood if they lost over the weekend.
Yeah. Yes, you were. Yes, you were, man. Absolutely. But no, you're 100% right, man. 100% right.
The reason I'm bringing them, there's actually a point I'm trying to make besides bringing up Notre Dame. When they recruit football players, they specifically tell them, don't you dare not play basketball or baseball.
Really?
Yes, they do. Now, you would think you got a 5-star quarterback coming in, they're going to say, we don't want you getting hurt. No. For the exact reasons that they like multi-sports players, because they're better athletes. And they also believe in the experience. I'm not saying Notre Dame's perfect, but that's the way they recruit. The reason I know that, I was blessed. I've been actually been out to their fantasy camp twice. I had a sack my second time.
Get out.
I just want you to know. Yeah.
I call you Rudy 2.0?
Yeah. Rudy was offsides, though.
No, he was over the line.
I thought he was, too. It kills me to say that, but my man was offside. Little run ain't getting in there that quick. Yeah. I have an advantage. You know what I mean? He's this big.
Dude, that's hilarious. Oh, my God. I love it. I love it, man. This is awesome, man. Like, just be able to share a microphone with you, man. And because I didn't know that. I would have never known that about Notre Dame. And I think, why don't other universities do that?
I think most of them do.
Okay.
I do. I'm not saying all. I don't know.
Right.
But I think they have the mindset that the better all-around athlete is probably going to wind up being the better player. And like you said, you use different muscle groups. You learn different concepts in different sports too.
You also learn how to be coached by different people.
Yes.
And everybody has different terminology. There's a lot of different things, man. Like, why? It's what I don't understand. We're in a world where everybody wants to be so diverse, but we want to pigeonhole these kids.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I'll never understand. It's got to be, I really do think the whole NIL thing has changed everything. It's changed a lot of perspective. I don't know how you feel about that. Let me, because I know we would be here all night. The only thing I will say about the NIL is I was always a huge advocate of college players getting paid, but within reason. And the only reason why I always said that was I know how much it takes for a college athlete to be an athlete, and they don't have time to do much. And the university is profiting off of them. However, all I ever said was, look, give them the money they need to eat, to sleep, to be. But now we're talking million. This is going to a different dynamic that I don't even know if everybody even thought about, and it's coming to a head, man. It's really becoming a problem.
It is, and with the NIL, and I also think I'll get to the transfer portal in a minute. That's a nightmare too. Kids can just decide up and say, okay, they've been to 4 schools in 4 years. I've always believed if if an athlete wants to take a girl out on a date, he should have enough money in his pocket to take her to a movie and take her get a bite to eat.
Yes.
If he wants to go get a cheeseburger with a couple of his teammates, he should have that. I always thought the best way to do it would be like a stipend kind of thing. Give the kids, and I think it shouldn't just be your revenue sports, because I'm always a believer you share the wealth. If you do for one, you do for others. Even the tennis players that might not get 80,000 fans at a game, right? They should be treated with respect also. Your swim team.
I agree.
But I think it is getting out of hand. I know You know me with Notre Dame. Their running back was offered $4.5 million from the University of Georgia to transfer. And he said no.
Wow.
That should not be happening in college. Not just because it's Notre Dame. I would say the same thing. I would say the same thing if Notre Dame tried to pull somebody from there. You're getting it's crazy.
$4.5 million just to transfer.
Jeremiah Love.
I'm not a big follower of college sports and that, but I just feel like eventually something's got to give.
What I'm hearing, and again, I'm not saying at all that I know everything, far from it, but what I'm hearing fairly consistently is that eventually this is going to fall on the university on how to handle it. Then you're getting into, well, technically the university is paying these athletes. Technically they're professional now. You're opening up, and don't think for a minute, this maybe not the money yet, but this is filtered down into high school.
Oh,
you see kids transferring. I see it with basketball and football a lot. They'll go to a school, they'll live up here, but they'll transfer to IMG Academy in Florida or one of the top schools in the country out in California, Texas, or Florida in hopes to getting more exposure. It's crazy. And it's a dangerous path we're heading down. It really is.
Well, and like you said, it filters down.
Yep.
And it comes back as we kind of finish this out about coming back down to the parents and coming back down to that pressure. I say these two words a lot: parental pressure. And I think that's the problem. That it's really centralized in that problem of the money. And so whenever you talk about money, it's always problems, right? More money, more problems, right? I mean, and that means whether you're benefiting from it or you're not, but just the fact that it's there and it's for the taking. And now high school 2 years from now is probably going to be 8th grade, right? Let's be honest. It's all going to. You said the transfer portal, and I'll never forget. Last year, I had the head coach of, his name was Justin Newton from Reinhardt University, Christian Academy School. The first thing he said was, Tony, the transfer portal. He's like, it's not going away. We have to adjust. But man, has it made life hard? He's like, because every year you're teaching a new class. It's got to be tough.
It used to be, if you remember, not too long ago, if you wanted to transfer, you sat out a year. Got in high school too. I remember when my brother played for Coach Fox. I know I would hear my brother and my dad talking about high school players wanting to transfer, and they wouldn't because they'd have to sit out a year. And I don't think they were allowed to transfer as seniors. It was much stricter back then.
It's going down a bad slope.
Yep.
And speaking of that, I ask everybody who comes on the program, because this is obviously a lot of this is about, the May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and whether it be coaches, parents, athletes, we've all had that moment, or we witnessed somebody else had that moment. So throughout your 30 years, whether it be yourself, whether it be a player, whether it be a student, have you ever had to intervene or ever had a moment of, mental health awareness where you had to help either yourself or another student or a player through a certain situation that got to a point where, wow, we really got to nail this in the butt right now?
There were a few occasions where when I was teaching at different places, I go back to, we talked about shared experiences with kids being put under so much pressure.
Oh, yeah.
And I had one young lady who was a high school student, very good soccer player. She really, really, was hearing it. Parents, coaches wanting her to come to college, and she had a meltdown. I was on the student assistance team at this school. I think I shot that to you in the message.
Yes.
And it can be crippling. It could get to the point where they don't want to play their favorite sport anymore. Man, that's sad. So, yeah, I've had experience. I've also seen, unfortunately, we get back to what we talked about in the beginning, the unfortunate things we see at games. You see a kid, if I can share one with you.
Yeah,
quick.
Please. No, quick. The floor is yours.
I was doing a kids game at Jardel Rec Center up on Cottman Avenue.
Yeah.
And I think it was 10 and unders, 10 years old.
10 U. Wow.
And this kid was pretty good. His father was the coach. I did not know the coach was his father right away.
Okay.
And when I say he screamed at this kid, you could hear a pin drop in the gym because everybody was shocked at what they were saying. And I went up to the gentleman. And I said, sir, as long as I'm here, I said, you will not talk to anybody like that. He said, that's my son. I said, and that makes it right? I said, I don't care if he's your son or not. You don't talk to anybody like that. Not when I'm here. I really do believe that he really set that kid on a path where if that doesn't change, that kid's going to lose all interest. going to be like, why? He's going to be like, why play if I'm going to get screamed at? And that's not the only example. That's just one that comes to mind, because I think the guy thought, well, since I'm his father, I'm okay doing that. No, you're not. It's awful. Might even be worse.
Listen, I can think of a lot of, different experiences too, man. And I won't say names, but I was at a basketball game and recently, last couple of years, and I went to watch one of my friend's daughters play, and she's amazing. And I watched the coach literally berate her to the point of her being hysterical in tears and not even wanting to come out of the locker room after halftime. Yeah. I'm thinking, what the hell's wrong with you, man? I understand you want to be hard and we hear about tough love and all that. I get that. But at the same time, man, these kids are spiraling. And with social media and with text messaging and group messages, and you think they don't have enough to deal with, and then I just keep saying this, we're doing them such a disservice. We really are. And unfortunately, we're seeing it come to a point where kids are taking their own lives over stuff like this, and it's all preventable. It's all friggin' preventable. So I don't know, man. Like I say to you, and I say to everybody, we just do better.
You have kids that they feel that if they don't get that scholarship, they're letting mommy and daddy down. And you go back to percentages. How many make it to college athletics, Division I, let alone Division III or NAIA? The percentages are still very small. How many make it to the pros? Maybe 2%, if that. It might even be lower than that. The expectations are unrealistic. And that's sad, because like you're breaking a kid down.
Yeah.
Your intentions might be good, but they're wrong.
Yep.
And we break kids down sometimes when we're like that. And that's unfortunate. I see it all the time, unfortunately.
And again, we do this podcast because it's all about bringing awareness, and the situations that we've talked about, the situations that people are dealing with right now. I tell everybody, understand you're not alone. We deal with this all the time. Unfortunately, we're not going to change, right? It's not going to change, but hopefully we can raise awareness to the fact that people could be like, hey, okay, it's not just me. It's happened to me. But I before we go, you do so much. Honestly, I know we talked about it, but we got to give you your flowers, man, because, you are huge in a youth community. Not only are you, you're doing refereeing and you're doing umpiring, right? But speak about what you're doing, what we were talking about earlier with the youth. Where was it? What school?
It was mainly at Archbishop Bryan. I was on the student assistance team.
Right. Yes.
What we would do, I'll keep it.
No,
obviously no names or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of, what the whole intentions are.
It was more social intervention in a sense that it wasn't just a kid who was struggling academically or had an issue with a coach or anything like that. There was some pretty serious stuff that we dealt with, and stuff that would break your heart. I'm a grown man. I'm 59 years old now. There were times when, as soon as the student left, I cried like a baby. I'm like, what the hell are these kids dealing with? It breaks your heart. It kills you. Yep. And you're watching them suffer. And, you do everything you can. You want to do more, and sometimes you can't. I'll never forget that time, because I worked with some really wonderful people at Ryan that were on the students assistance team. Some awesome teachers up there. And I know we did right by a lot of kids. One of the things we dealt with was, and this was almost every month, because Ryan used to have dances. Sometimes, and this is no secret. I think virtually all high school kids at some point, they like to take a little beer or whatever they drink. Yeah. Thank God I was never like that.
Yeah, me neither. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I know. But we would deal with them. And sometimes it was just, they made a bad decision. They were drinking. They learned from it. But then you might have that one time or those two times where there's something underneath and they're acting out.
Yep.
One thing I've tried to do, Tony, whether it's teaching, whether it's coaching, whether it's refereeing, one mistake does not define a person. And I've had kids flipped off and said something smart in a game. I see them a couple weeks later in another game, come up and say, hey, ref, I'm really sorry. It takes a man or a lady to do that. And so I'm going to look at that. I'm not going to remember them saying F you or whatever they said to me during the game. I'm going to remember that kid took a step, man. That's so important. I think sometimes we don't accentuate that good enough. We always look at the negative.
Always.
So, yeah.
Oh, it's a great way to end. It's true. We always I think we're wired that way. I don't know why, but we are. And I think that's a great point, because it filters down from a human being level to an adolescence level to your sports level.
Yeah.
You go out on the field and guess what? You can win a championship and it's up to you. And we're in a shootout and you made 5 out of 5, but you missed. Guess what? We live to play another day.
Yeah.
We live to play another day. Like that was one of the things I would always instill on my teams. Whether they had a terrible loss or they played like dog shit, honestly. And I knew that wasn't them. At the end, even though I would get in them and I would, but at the end, I'll be like, listen, guys, in all honesty, guess what? Pick your heads up because you're still going to go home and you're still going to get to play your video game. You'll get over it. Now we're going to go back tomorrow. We're going to redo it all over. You can be mad and frustrated, but when you leave this field, understand that you're still going to be you again. It's okay. Like it's so, and I think we all need to learn from that, man. But man, it's powerful.
Yeah. And Tony, last thing, one thing I try to do, if you watch me ref a kids game, say a CYO or a Department of Rec game, and you watch me referee a high school game, you'd probably see two different people. What you would notice at the CYO game, I'll talk to the kids. I'm not like a lot of other officials. Now, I can't do that in PIAA. I'd get shot. Because the first indication, even if it's not showing favoritism, that's exactly what the other coach would say. Yep. Like I'll tell a kid, I'll be running down the court in a CYO game. Kid will miss a shot. I'll say, shoot or shoot. I said, you got to keep shooting. I said, hang in there. Nobody hears me. I do that for a reason. And I go back to what we talked about. They're hearing, come on, you got to make that. They're hearing such bullshit from the stands, maybe from their coaches sometimes.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, there's times you can't do that, but there are times that you can. And I as long as I can, I always said this, if my high school assigners ever told me you can't ref kids anymore, I would not do high school. That's the biggest reason I like sticking with the kids. It's not the money. Believe me, it's not. It's something I thoroughly enjoy.
You enjoy it.
Yeah.
You're passionate about
exactly.
it. And it shows. Yeah. And I always say that when somebody's passionate about something, you see it, you feel it, you hear it. And I'll tell the last story before we get out of here that you just said, how you would talk to the kids. A lot of people knew me as a coach. They would always say, man, coach is really mean because I would get into some of my kids. When they would do things to me that were uncharacteristic, I'm like, you're better than that, man. Like I knew I could bring more out of them, but I'll never forget that one of the teams, and I'll leave names out of it, that we were playing, their goalie was unbelievable. This goal, we tried like hell to get something past this kid. And it literally was a 0-0 tie and went to a shootout. And this kid stopped everything. And then the final shot we shot, the kid slipped and it went in. And his coach, you would have thought that this kid just lost the Super Bowl. Nothing was ever said to him about how awesome he was. He was berating this kid. And I was like, wow. Me being me, I run out there. I don't even say nothing to the coach. I run right to the kid. I said, yo, come here, man. I said, I don't know what he's telling you right now, but guess what? I've never had a goalie stop all of my kids. You are the first one in 3 years that's never not allowed a shot in. I said, I know what happened. I watched you. I said, you thought one way, you slipped, and that's the only reason why he scored. You would have saved that with ease. So just do me a favor. Don't worry about that. Yeah. I said, you played a hell of a game today. And he was like, coach, I really appreciate that. I was like, I'm just telling you, man. Like, yes, it's our job to do that, man. Like that kid, I could tell was going to leave and his weekend would have been ruined. His weekend would have been ruined. And maybe even longer.
I just want to say that I can have a lingering effect and not a good one.
No. And that's what we're doing. But man, this has been great, man. Listen, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I don't think this is going to be the last time, by the way.
Well, hey, anytime you want.
Man, this has been awesome, man.
If we could get, it's like anything else. If we could get one or two people that maybe they take something from this and say, hey,
they will.
Tony or Mike made a good point. Then you know what? It was worth it.
Yes,
but it was worth seeing you, my brother.
Yeah, you too, man. And again, and this is like I said this in the beginning, and I'll say it again. You along your journey as an athlete, you meet people that you gravitate towards, that leave an impeccable image on you. And you were my 7th grade teacher. And this is why social media is great. I honestly, who knows? We wouldn't stay in contact if it was for social media.
Probably not. You're
but
right.
That's the right way to use social media. Exactly. That's why I always say, like, that's what social media is good for, right? Yep. We get to keep up on these events. And I'm not the only one. You keep up on all your past students. Yeah. I watch, I know. And I had so many people reach out to me like, bro, I can't wait to listen, man. I can't believe Mr. Odes is going to be on the show. Like, that is what you've done, and that's what I know. I feel I've done when the kids talk about me as a coach. So
absolutely.
But I want to thank you for everything that you do, and you've done for me.
Pleasure.
And as always, man, it's the Fighting for Overtime podcast. Again, any social format, any platform, subscribe. Whether you think I suck or you think I'm good, it doesn't matter.
You definitely don't.
We do our best. But listen, tune in next time because I got a lot of good guests coming on. We're going to have the assistant head coach for football, my man Billy Seitzer from Father Judge, coming on to talk about.
Friend of mine.
Right, great guy.
Yes, he is.
Right?
Yes, he is.
Did a lot of stuff when he was at Frankfurt for them kids that people don't even know about.
He had them Friday nights playing games in the
locking them in
the locker room and
locking them in so they could be safe.
Yep.
Yes.
I donated pizzas one time.
See?
Yep.
And they're the stories that people don't get, man. And I love so that's coming up. We got a lot of good things coming up. But man, as always, man, everybody stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for tuning in. And again, just remember, we're not going to change youth sports today, but it's all about memories and moments. And I always say, if we can just raise awareness, we're doing a good job. So everybody have a good night, and we'll tune in next time. See you next episode. Fighting for Overtime is a Rise and React media production. If you're looking to start a podcast, if you're looking to get some direction, hit us up, let us know. We'll help you out there as well. Again, for everybody, enjoy your time, memories and moments, and keep fighting that fight. Continue to fight in overtime to make your kid have the best experience that they can have when it comes to playing youth sports.